Geraldo Rivera live in Libya. Geraldo, if you can't be on the couch, there's nobody better to be there in Benghazi. What do you see, Geraldo? What have you picked up since you arrived?
Well, first of all, Brian, I do wear a wedding ring. I'm sure you do too. But here we are in Benghazi. Benghazi is the rebel stronghold, Brian, Gretchen, and Steve. It is a city that was beleaguered and besieged up until about a week ago when the coalition and the French bombers, the American bombers, the cruise missiles absolutely wiped out Gaddafi's armor. This is Omar al-Makhdar Square. Makhdar was one of the great liberation heroes of Libya, fighting against the Italian colonizers to get them out of this country all through the early part from 1911 all the way to 1943. This square, as you can see, is absolutely packed. And we had a rain squall about 15 minutes ago, so it's not as dense as it was even then. But there are still 5,000 people, I would estimate, here. And listening to you talk about the possibilities of reconciliation, a ceasefire, and a truce, I don't know. Some of the speeches we were hearing, the anti-Gaddafi speeches, they were calling him a murderer, a perpetrator of genocide. It seems very difficult to me, having listened to these folks, the rebels, for the last couple of days. It would be a real long shot. They want to arrest the dictator. That's their preference. Kill him if necessary. But to make peace with him seems like a long shot, guys. Back to you.
Geraldo, here's what they're saying. They have a UN envoy there, and they're saying to this Mahmoud Jibril, who is evidently in charge and representing them, they said that they demand that the Gaddafi remove all his forces from all the cities and give freedom to the masses as part of the reason the ceasefire would happen. I mean, does that sound feasible? Sound like we're getting true story?
Well, to keep Gaddafi in power and to have him release all the prisoners and to withdraw his troops, where would he go? What would he do? I guess he could stay in the compound in Tripoli, although we've been bombing it with cruise missiles. Listen, from the UN envoy's lips to God's ears, I'm sure that everybody here wants peace. Everybody here wants to remove the threat. They're still petrified that even as he came in a week ago before the U.S., the French, and the others eliminated his forces in the city, they fear that he will come back. You know, the rebels have been in retreat. They are a very disorganized rabble, really, armed rabble, with many of them with no experience with arms. They have the discipline. I was at the front in Ashdabia this morning. They have the discipline of an L.A. street gang. They are no match for Gaddafi's forces. It is only by virtue of the Western powers that these people are free to even hold a rally like this. Listen, if it happens, I certainly am sure that people would be happy to have the tanks stop firing at them, or the mortars or the rockets or the rest of it. But to leave Gaddafi in power, real long shot, Brian.
Geraldo, do you think that all of this was thought through by our government before we launched those first airstrikes a couple weeks ago?
You know, that's an excellent question, Gretchen. I think that, first of all, when President Obama said that Gaddafi must go, you know, the first question that came to my mind was, where was he going to go? When you back a rat into a corner, that's when the rat bites and claws and is at its most deadly. I wish they had an exit strategy for Gaddafi. Sure. Because I don't believe, I remember I covered Nicaragua. Somoza, the dictator, went into exile in Paraguay. He lasted about 3 weeks before someone knocked him off. Right. I'm sure that's on the minds of all these autocrats who've been thrown out of power. Back to you.
Well, Geraldo, there is a story out of, I believe, the Telegraph in London that says that apparently a top aide to one of Gaddafi's kids has been in London, and they're perhaps talking about some way to get out of this gracefully. And at the same time, you've got Moussa Koussa, who had essentially been their Secretary of State. He has defected, and apparently they're talking to him about what happened regarding the Lockerbie bombing. And so now suddenly prosecution for the bombing is taking center stage as well. Once these guys leave, could they be held for what happened back in 1988?
Musa Kusa, Steve, is a really bad dude. I mean, before he was the foreign minister, kind of the Secretary of State, as you say, he was the interior minister. He was the torturer-in-chief. You know, if they give him any slack, he's like Baghdad Bob or Chemical Ali back in the Iraq days. If they can pardon him, I just want to add one thing very quickly. South Africa, they had decades of people doing terrible things, the blacks to the whites and vice versa. Then Nelson Mandela came along. He established his Reconciliation Commission, and they decided that, hey, whatever we did, whatever bad stuff went down over the preceding decades, if we start prosecuting this one or that one, we'll never get beyond it. So South Africa did reasonably come together and has now a modern, democratic, integrated society. It has some troubles, but of course, it's much better than it was under apartheid. I guess you could say that the same thing would be conceivable here, but they really have such bitter feelings about Gaddafi on this side of the country. Eastern Libya and Western Libya are, you know, as far apart as Canada and Mexico. I mean, they really have different, and I don't really know what the mindset is in Tripoli. I see some crowds for Gaddafi once in a while, but it would seem to me very difficult. If you can pull this off, whoever does that is definitely a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And in terms of Lockerbie, when they get into the nuts and bolts, remember McGreevy, the guy they convicted of Lockerbie, who supposedly was dying of cancer. He had terminal cancer. He came back to Libya to die here. As far as I know, he's still in Tripoli with Gaddafi. Indeed, he may be the last guy standing next to Gaddafi when you know, all the stuff hits the fan, Steve.
Well, you know, Geraldo will be checking with you all weekend. Geraldo at large. And, of course, you'll be contributing throughout the day. Geraldo in front of the biggest demonstration I have seen in all the shots we've had in Libya. Geraldo, stay safe. We'll talk to you again. Thanks.
And these folks, they love America. You see the American flags, the French flags. I see a Moroccan flag, a Qatarese flag. You know, they're pushing to the American flag, and let them see the American flag. And you know, when was the last time you saw a big crowd praying at a Muslim rally and they're flying the stars and stripes? You know, they love the Americans. They love Sarkozy and the French because of saving them, bailing them out. But most of these folks want to be friends with us, I think.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's an amazing image, Geraldo.
You're
right. You hardly ever see that.
Most of them want to be friends.
Thank you so much, Geraldo.
And get their picture with Geraldo, most
no
likely.
kidding, please.
All right.